And this division really has personal relevance to my life story, particularly in understanding my inherent social status. I think in every sphere where political, radical, protest based, or within any type of philosophical arena uh, that is for the pursuit of truth, there is a constant pattern of self undermining, self alienation, and self destruction in any type of institutionalized form. Uh, and the way that that basically manifests from a single person into a group is through trauma and through abuse and through violence and force. And the way that I relate to that is because I was abused as a child at the hands of a caretaker, and it continued as for years. And the sexual abuse seemed it it didn't seem out of it didn't seem odd to me. What seemed odd and the most distressing was the part where other people found out about it and witnessing my reaction to how those people took it when they found out about it. And this alienation led me to growing up with deep resentment towards my social conditions because I felt like my, upper class, I have, mostly everything that I would want as a young person. I felt like it wasn't deserved because of my failings as like a social being, because of the alienation that I had based on what happened to me and seeing people react as if what happened to me happened to them. And so I distanced myself from my peers, or as I got older, I distanced myself from my peers or like my contemporaries as far as like my parents' friends, kids, and stuff like that, because I really didn't relate to them because I had a resentment towards those type of people because um, I saw my family entity in my direct peers. So I found solace and friendships with individuals who were I saw as lower in the socioeconomic class structure, and also those dealing with like mental health and drug issues, as I found those people to be more relatable to me. And as I grew up, I began to um, over time I began to like really not resent my upper middle class background, which I realized is not escapable. I was born into it. It's the same thing as the aristocracy or it's based on birth. And through doing, by doing this acceptance is also coinciding with my material conditions getting better, career success. And so gradually I found it difficult to maintain resentment towards my class status or relate authentically to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, because if I did so, I would be an outright hypocrite because I'm not struggling anymore, right? I still share values with these individuals, even though I can't fully comprehend their daily struggles with basic needs like I did at one point. But a significant part of my identity was tied to these struggles. And so reconstructing my identity has been a challenging process since in that struggle. And so I feel like this what I'm saying here reflects like this fundamental human need for social security and a sense of self-worth, often driven by materialistic goals like securing a nice apartment or a good job. And as I became more and more successful and less able to relate to those like from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, I began to isolate myself among my contemporaries, which affected my relationships. And this behavior seemed almost like schizophrenic with no logical reason other than like a subconscious desire for my own self alienation. And I mean, in our society, we mostly only know how to express love through material means, but genuine love and human connection transcends materialism entirely. And I realized that by choosing love and expressing it beyond material forms. And through that, I would be able to overcome this self imposed alienation. However, one key element of the condition that I face, along with a number of other people that are much like me, is that the trauma to which that has shaped the way I see the world has been rationalized in my brain to the point where it has created these polar opposites of brainwaves, where because of my inherent class privilege, along with my ingrained social alienation from the abuse of my childhood, I'm not oriented towards my material conditions in the way that others are, because my material conditions, even when they were at my absolute worst, were still better than most people who haven't had the inherent class privilege that I had. So because of that, I don't have this like depressive state that I land in due to depleting material conditions. Because of the learned resentment of my inherent class status, I see the world through the lens of lesser privileged people, to which I am able to contextualize versus the place to which I sit in the class hierarchy, which makes me realize, like, hey, it might be bad for you right now, but deep down, it could be so much worse. And that's really what keeps me from landing in that depressive state when I have material constraints. Because when I used to get into that state, when I was poor or my material conditions were less, what did I do? Well, I got into politics. I got into activism. I did things that I felt would better my material conditions. Now, of course, that was a fantasy, and all of the organizations and groups that I was involved with were basically just meant to rinse me of any motivation to try to change things. But then in doing so, I meet people, I become social, and this is where everything changes, because due to the neglect and abuse and trauma that shaped me on a social level, I'm not able to properly express myself, my needs, or my wants in social settings with people I trust, because I've never been able to do that comfortably without it feeling like it would be seen as an attack on others. And because of that, when I'm in social groups and other people are making their demands and needs and wants heard, it makes me alienated, because in seeing others having their needs and wants met, I don't have mine met, simply because I'm incapable of expressing them in a healthy manner. And another thing that happens because of this, like, I'm incapable of expressing to people needs and wants because I'm so used to being okay with what everyone else wants, that, like, when it comes to actually discussing the things in which myself and others around me relate over, when I'm like engaging with people and really starting to build up towards a genuine connection that's going to get me to start seeing the world from a place of love and social trust and mutual care, if that connection is somehow, if it somehow doesn't lead to the place in which I'm hoping it to lead to, if my psychological attempt at synchronizing my brain waves with these people around me falls short, it will almost immediately put me into this massive depressive state. And because I'm not capable of expressing my emotions properly, I will either just not express that there's something wrong with me and just keep playing along with whatever's happening, or I'll react in a way that's very unproductive and thus will cause more social alienation. And so the way in which this depressive state operates and has operated in my mind since I was a young adult has been this like it's organized in this way and rationalized in my brain, because that alienation that other people that are less fortunate than me have tied to their material conditions, for me, as an inherent middle class privileged person with neglect and trauma to shape my worldview, that alienation is connected to my social constraints, which while other people might have the urge to like hurt themselves as material beings when they reach this dark place of self isolation, for me, it's never been about hurting my body. I'm not suicidal. It's always just been about hurting myself as a social being, to which I have partaken in social suicide. This is where you get the conspiracy theorist, the radical, the shit poster. This is all a part of my drive to socially alienate myself and withdraw myself from general society. And it's like all of this pent up emotion, all of this tension, your brain can't hold all of that for that long period of time. So what ends up happening is my brain seems to function in this unique way that cycles between these periods of depression and relief. And it's like my thoughts polarize, creating this back and forth pattern. When I'm focused on the social constraints I face, I feel deeply immersed in like a down type depression based on social anxiety. But then there are times when my attention shifts to the material world and I find some comfort. And during those moments, I feel a connection with others who are also alienated by the effects of capitalism. However, as my material conditions have improved, this sense of connection doesn't feel genuine anymore. And I'm not as constrained by material conditions anymore as I used to be, which ironically makes me more aware of my social alienation. And so this awareness then plunges me back into a state of depression. And it's a reoccurring cycle that I become less materially constrained. My focus intensifies on the social aspects of my alienation, leading to these repeated episodes of depression and temporary relief. And this results in a pattern where my brain, I think, is attempting to categorize and manage this depression, akin to oscillating between two conflicting orientations, much like how someone deals with primal needs such as hunger, thirst, or sleep, which I think is why sleep deprivation actually knocks me out of this brainwave, because my brain starts to be oriented towards those primal material drives to which I'm wired to feel good about. I've always had them, rather than my social drives, which I'm wired to feel bad about. It's as if my brain is trying to time these depressive cycles based on my material and social conditions, preventing them from being ever present, or even worse, in direct conflict. And compared to the complex and cyclical pattern of depression and relief I've described, I think someone with a more neurotypical brain would probably experience depression in a more straightforward and consistent manner without such extreme shifts. And this contrast is significant when I think about the conditions that a bipolar person would have in someone with autism, right? This tendency of my brain to organize obsessively also influences how it processes this depression. And it is a drive that is essentially for balancing my mental process. It helps to redirect my brain waves and shifts them from being analytical about social dynamics to focusing analytically on the material world, while it encourages a more emotional and loving approach towards social interactions, as opposed to applying such emotional interactions to material aspects. This toggles between different modes of thinking and feeling in a continuous subconscious effort in my brain to maintain a harmonious balance in my perception and interaction with the world around me. And I think that this mechanism is pivotal as it highlights how our brains can develop these subconscious coping mechanisms to navigate our traumas. These adaptive responses to trauma manifest through these polarized brainwaves and this separated way of thinking, which becomes a source of ingenuity and practical life skill. And they are instruments in shaping future developments and in our learning from past generational traumas, because it's crucial to do this for our collective evolution and adaptation. These traumas are the keys to better the world. And in addition to providing these subconscious coping mechanisms, our brains also have evolved to proactively ward off more severe mental conditions. And I think this preemptive adaptation is a testament to the brain's remarkable ability to learn and evolve over time and develop mechanisms to mitigate the risk of much more debilitating mental health issues. This process, though, it manifests in ways that are perceived as mental illness. And what might be labeled as a disorder, it could actually be, in fact, the brain's natural way of preventing a much worse disorder. And this understanding highlights our brain's complexity of our evolutionary capacity in safeguarding ourselves from deep mental harm, and recognizing that these manifestations are potential preventative mechanisms leads to a more empathetic and informed approach to mental health. And we can acknowledge that these underlying protective intents of our brain responses are actually healthy and are preventing us from further self-destruction. And I think considering the brain's evolutionary and adaptive mechanisms, I think we can theorize that the extreme mood swings in bipolar disorder that I'm kind of referring to is like this overclocking of emotional regulation. And I think that this could be the brain's strategy to cope with stress or neurological imbalances, and potentially serves as a neural diversion to prevent the onset of more debilitating symptoms typical of like schizophrenia, uh, because the brain is doing these flips to make it so that your conflicting desires are in aren't being held at the same time, which would then create like the 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 conflict that would cause like a schizophrenic episode or a neurotic episode. And I think in this context we can see that purely just a theory. I don't know anything, but I think this makes so much sense to me. I think bipolar disorder to the brain is seen as like a lesser of two evils, whereas the brain is opting to intense mood verifications to stay more grounded in reality, as opposed to the altered reality that schizophrenia creates. And I know this is unconventional, but I think it's a theory that highlights the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity and adaptive functioning over time. And I think it aligns with the what we know about the ability of our brains to adapt and protect ourselves in response to various stimuli and trauma. And this is essential because historically, individuals with unique perspectives, like my own, uh, have a tendency for, people who have a tendency for obsessive organization or unconventional thinking, they played significant roles in society historically. But today, these traits are misunderstood and stigmatized instead of being embraced like they should be. My unique thought patterns, which diverge from the normal, not only fuel my desire for new experiences and relationships, they lead to major life changes that other people probably wouldn't decide to do, like moving to new cities. But it also drives my passion for to do things like this, to write and to stream. I feel like the neurotypical type person wouldn't be driven to do these types of things, and this type of uniqueness of my expression comes from my this disorder. But in contemporary society, this divergence is viewed like as it's viewed with misunderstanding. It's viewed with direct alienation rather than the reverence that was afforded to eccentrics for their distinct contributions and perspectives that has always helped society. And so this is a pivotal thing for me because it instills a profound sense of liberation, because I recognize the value in eccentrics and what they bring to society. And it makes me feel like, oh, this makes so much sense. It makes so much sense in my role. Like, uh, this, I understand the importance of authentic self care and nurturing real life human connections, because I'm able to now see my value in society through the fact that I am eccentric. And even if things are outside of my comfort zone, I'm still willing to do them because it's worth doing. And it will get me to a place where I don't feel those downs, because doing new things is what gives me the up. And I think this approach to life, though, is new to me because I've only recently realized that this is going on, aligns with, my long held desires. Embrace discomfort, confront your fear. I've come to see this. It's crucial for personal growth, but also for contributing to meaningful societal change. This is a world that will benefit immensely from the unique insights of eccentrics, and prioritizing one's well-being as an eccentric is should not just be a personal choice, but it's for it's not just about you to be good to yourself. It's about your value to the community and the greater good of of the cause. to be good to yourself, because eccentrics are needed. Whether you're, whatever you're doing, you see the world differently, you're doing something good.